Welcome everyone. I am Larissa Lockwood, the Director for Clean Air at environmental charity Global Action Plan. So we are hosting this important event off the back of the release of a very important report from the European Public Health Alliance called Health-Related Social Costs of Air Pollution Due to Residential Heating and Cooking. Global Action Plan are the UK partner for this European release, and thank you, EPHA, for this opportunity. You may have seen some of the coverage from this report last week. Importantly, the report highlights how the relative health-related social costs of air pollution from domestic heating and cooking are about equal to that of transport, and arguably therefore warrant the same level of policy attention. In the UK, we have targets in place to phase out the internal combustion engine in the next 8 years, but we really haven't seen that same level of ambition on heating and cooking. So this report, therefore, builds that further evidence to support the need for improved energy efficiency, renewable energy, and a more urgent plan to decarbonise home heating and cooking. And of course, with climate change, the cost of living crisis, the Russia-Ukraine war, and the energy price hike, how we heat our homes has never been more topical nor more complicated. So there is a lot of excellent content in this report, which you will hear about shortly. But for the purposes of today's short event, we wanted to bring some focus. And one of EPHA's findings is that the air pollution health costs of domestic burning are €1 billion per year in the UK. Yet in the UK, only 8% of the population use wood burners as their main source of heating, because most wood burners, especially in urban areas, are installed and used for aesthetic purposes. So as a charity that focuses on areas where the connection between people and planet is most tangible, and with two major portfolios on clean air and post-consumerism, we have chosen to frame this event around domestic burning in the UK, recognising that it is the most harmful heating practice and contributes significantly to air pollution, and that for many, it is a lifestyle or consumer choice. And therefore, there is a lot that we need to do to cut emissions from this major source of air pollution. In fact, at Global Action Plan, we would like to see a phase out leading to a ban on solid fuel burning stoves in urban areas. And in the meantime, and as part of that process, we need to reverse the trend for wood burning stoves and encourage people to use them less and to use them better. For as we'll discover, there are many public misconceptions around domestic burning, and there is a cavernous public information gap which needs to be filled. And that is why I'm excited about this report and about this event, as hopefully, as well as sharing information, we can share ideas with each other and really work together to see more action to tackle air pollution from domestic burning in the UK. I'm delighted that there are so many local authorities here today, some of whom may well have received some DEFRA Air Quality Grant funding to run a campaign on domestic burning. So I hope that this event is useful for you today, and I hope that as a movement, we can work together in the most efficient way to coordinate action on domestic burning across the country. Up first, I'm delighted to introduce the author of the report that has brought us here today, that report entitled Health-Related Social Costs of Residential Heating and Cooking, and that highlights how domestic burning is a key issue in the UK. Marisa Kortlenad is a senior business and general economist working at CE Delft. So Marisa, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to highlight some results of our report, which focused on the EU as a whole, but now I'm focusing at the UK, of course. First of all, as just already mentioned, cooking and heating cause air pollution, which means damage to human health. And since usually no financial value is attached to these impacts, they are usually not considered by policymakers when they design policies and use economic variables to design them and evaluate them. In order to make sure that they also include damage to human health, in this case due to heating and cooking, we frequently adopt social cost approach. This means that we give a value to the adverse health impact to society. And this is an estimate of the loss in economic welfare in society. And there are two main elements in that. The first one is related to direct healthcare expenditures, so related to hospital admissions, but also loss of working days. And the second one, we call it indirect health impacts and the accompanied welfare loss, which means that people feel discomfort when they are ill, they face increased mortality risk and reduced life expectancy. And of course, they have some willingness to pay to avoid all these negative impacts. And therefore, we calculated an economic value. The social costs differ per country, partly because of differences in the GDP, because when people have more to spend, they usually also have a higher willingness to pay to avoid negative health impacts. And one other element is population density, because in highly populated areas, of course, there are more people affected by the same level of air pollution. So therefore, the social costs differ per region, per country. In our report, we considered the health-related cost to society of 7 air pollutants. We looked at direct pollution at home when fuels are combusted, and we are looking at indirect pollution for the electricity and heat-based options, because their energy inputs are produced at generator plants. But even though there is not combustion at home, we still wanted to make a fair comparison. So we consider the indirect air pollution at those electricity and heating plants. In the research, we covered the European area and UK as a whole, and 4 case study countries: Spain, Italy, UK, and Poland. And one of the main results is a total cost estimate expressed in euro per year. And it's calculated by using total annual air pollution emissions obtained from Eurostat, combined with the social cost figures per emission. And based on that calculation, we found that for the UK, the total health-related social costs are 2.7 billion in 2018. And the main cause is direct pollution due to combustion at home, and a smaller amount can be related to indirect pollution levels. Then when we had the total figures, it was of course interesting to see what fuel and technique combinations are mainly responsible for those health-related costs. So we considered the various energy consumptions, emission factors, and prices. And based on that, we found that in the United Kingdom, wood stoves are the main contributors to the total cost figure, even though they have a relatively smaller share in final energy consumption. Gas boilers, it's the other way around. They are frequently used in terms of final energy consumption, but their contribution is a little bit lower. And this is due to the fact that the contribution is determined by how frequently they are applied in practice, and the health cost per technique. And for example, wood stoves, they are not frequently applied, but since the health cost per technique is very high, you still arrive at a high share in total cost figure. And the same holds for coal boilers. They only represent 1% in total energy consumption, while they contribute 13% in total health cost, because they are heavily polluting. And when we differentiated the total cost to various technique and fuel combinations, we also wanted to know at the individual appliances. So we also calculated that by emission factors and the environmental prices, also called social cost estimates. But because it's very difficult to interpret these results, we also gave it some context while calculating cost per average household. So based on an annual energy consumption for a particular household in the UK. And we also found, not surprisingly, that coal boilers and wood stoves impose a high social cost, and gas boilers are in between, and the cleanest options are heat pumps and the fully renewable things like solar and wind energy. Then finally, we considered how to reduce those social related costs. Well, first of all, we looked at some alternative fuel technique combinations. Due to the time, I won't be discussing them right now, but in the report you can find we considered hydrogen, heat pumps, and we looked at how it would work out if you green our electricity and heat production, because, for example, green hydrogen is not fully green at the moment because due to the current electricity mix, you still have emissions. And the same holds for heat pumps. Although they only have 10 euros on the imposed cost, you can lower that down by making sure that the electricity the heat pump uses is fully green, and then you arrive at zero total related health costs. I want to close my presentation by showing that this is an underestimation of the total social health related cost, because we only considered outdoor pollution, and of course indoor pollution is also important. It's depending on many factors, and there's further research needed to make sure that we can add both indoor and outdoor pollution estimates together to give a full impression of the health related social costs. Thank you for listening, and in case you have any questions, you can ask them here or reach out to me. This is my contact information.
Thank you, Marisa. That was fascinating, and it really is a very important and helpful piece of research. It's figures like this that talk to policymakers, so it'll be really helpful. Next up, we have Professor Frank Kelly, who, amongst other positions and accolades, is the director of the Environmental Research Group at Imperial College London. And he's here to outline some of the health effects of wood-burning smoke in more detail. Frank, over to you.
Thank you very much, Larissa, and good afternoon or good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting, I guess, on World Health Day on this very important topic. So, in particular, smoke pollution, that's particles and the gases, are widely acknowledged to be detrimental to health. In the short term, they can exacerbate asthma and they can trigger cardiovascular events, while in the longer term, they're associated with ill health in general and disease development. So as our understanding of these issues has improved in recent years, it's quite clear that we should be reducing these exposures, which are driving ill health. But in this respect, respect to wood burning, it seems as if we're doing the opposite, i.e. there's an increased exposure to wood smoke due to increasing popularity of wood burners. These stoves in homes, not there to heat, but they're really just to make us feel better. And importantly, in modern homes, where ventilation is decreased due to energy saving measures, that means that probably indoor pollution is increased. And this is something which we really haven't got a good enough handle on yet, but it could be, the real elephant in the room here. And as you just heard, this is a growing issue, and it's not just unique to the UK, as wood burning is even more popular and essential actually in some of our neighbouring countries. So looking forward, it's not just dealing with this indoor wood burning issue, I think, because we've got a whole range of new challenges which are arising through wood smoke inhalation in the ambient environment. I mean, climate change and increasing temperatures has led to an increased risk of forest and shrubland fires. And recently we've seen and heard about, major fires in the Western US and Canada, in Australia and Indonesia, and even here in the UK. If you look back at the media releases about fires in the UK, you'll find that we've had a series of major ones, with the Moray wildfire in Scotland in 2019, and then Saddleworth Moor up in Manchester, fires in North Wales and in the Peak District, all within the last 12 months. So these wildfires release tons of PM into the air, and they will obviously drive air pollution problems in nearby communities, leading to increased health problems, including increased risk of asthma exacerbations. And it's on days like that we see more people having to go to accident emergency and visit their GPs and take more medication. So I guess in summary, burning solid fuel such as wood leads to the release of a range of pollutants known to have detrimental effects to health. And armed with this understanding, we should be taking measures that reduce this risk and not letting this important message go up in smoke. The WHO recently upgraded their guidance on a range of these pollutants, which we get from burning any combustion source such as wood. And clearly, it's not just traffic, as Larissa said. There is a whole range of different sources of pollutants which we will need to bring under control if we have any hope at all of meeting those WHO guidelines in the future. So this particular issue around wood burning is one of those important issues which we need to do much better on. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. That was both slightly terrifying and motivating at the same time. And yeah, right to bring in the fact that air moves. So this isn't just a UK problem, and actually the wood smoke issue is far worse in other countries, but will also be having an impact over here. Great. The next speaker is Hazel Agombar. She's a campaigner and volunteer from Mums for Lungs, and Hazel's talk is on Neighbourhood wood smoke.
My name is Hazel Agombar. I live in Winchester and I'm a volunteer for Mums for Lungs. We're a grassroots organisation campaigning for clean air for everybody, particularly children and babies. We're all well aware that log burners have grown in popularity over the past 10 years. I have to admit that up until 3 years ago, my family and I used a log burner during colder months. At the time, I was working for Southampton City Council in their active travel team, trying to reduce traffic-related air pollution around schools. During my research, I became aware, to my astonishment, that wood smoke was even more toxic than traffic fumes, with very high PM 2.5 content. The cognitive dissonance became too much, so we decommissioned our log burner. But as we were doing so, several of our neighbours were installing them. All of them have central heating, but were choosing, as I did, to have a log burner mainly for aesthetic reasons. And now, on the majority of evenings and weekends between October and March, you can smell wood smoke in the street. I noticed the smell everywhere, and not only outside, but inside our home as well. The smoke doesn't just blow away. Depending on weather conditions, it can linger for hours. I can smell it around door frames, window frames, and vents, etc. I have no control over what my children are breathing in our own home. My children come home from school having walked along a couple of streets where households burn wood, and their hair and clothes stink of wood smoke. The past couple of winters, my son has even noticed the distinct smell of wood smoke in his classroom, coming from the houses surrounding the school. We have members from Aberdeen to Penzance. Many are affected badly, both physically and mentally, by the wood smoke in their neighbourhoods. Several have approached their councils, but councils are powerless to act. Even the most efficient so-called eco-design stoves still pollute. And what frustrates me most is this is largely an unnecessary source of air pollution right in the heart of where people live, work and go to school. Mums for Lungs are frequently contacted by people concerned about wood smoke. Here's a flavour of the type of comments we receive. I don't use my garden now because the air is so unhealthy. The smoke triggers my migraines and it affects our health and happiness. All of our neighbours now have wood stoves. It's totally depressing. There is no escape from the smoke. My father's health has deteriorated as a result of his neighbours using a wood stove regularly. The air quality is dreadful. I'd feel that I'd won the lottery if log burners were banned. We've submitted freedom of information requests to all smoke control zones across England to compare the rate of complaints versus the number of enforcements. The responses revealed that just 1 in 1,000 complaints are acted upon. I'm excited by the coming together of so many people from the clean air movement here today. Let's align our messaging around domestic wood burning. Let's work together to ensure that this largely unnecessary and avoidable source of pollution is high on the clean air agenda. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hazel. Fantastic stuff. I mean, Mums for Lungs are running a really brilliant campaign on wood burning stoves, and I love some of their artwork when they get the children involved. Stinky pongy wood smoke hurts us. You know, a new child could use that slogan, but say it how it is. Okay, next we have Tim Dexter from Asthma and Lung UK, who leads their clean air campaign and team. And he's here to share some thoughts on why the clean air community needs to tackle domestic burning as a sector.
Thanks very much, Larissa, and hi to everyone. So we know that air pollution has a significant impact on respiratory health that can act as triggers for help to cause flare-ups for things like asthma or COPD, which means that people with those conditions can go through a particularly bad period where they're struggling to breathe. But also, we know that it has an impact on the development of children's lungs, and it can cause people to develop those conditions and much more likely to develop those conditions as they grow up if they're exposed to air pollution. So almost 9 out of 10 people with lung conditions say that air pollution affects their health in some way, and that's them experiencing it potentially during days of high air pollution, or when they're exposed, when they know that they've been exposed to wood smoke or traffic fumes. 60% have been discouraged from leaving their home due to toxic air. So that's people changing their behaviour drastically, which will have a significant impact on their quality of life, just because they're concerned about how air pollution is impacting their breathing. We hear about the impact of domestic burning on lung conditions almost every day through the helpline and through our support networks, whether that's smoke from bonfires or fumes from neighbours' chimneys, as we heard about from Heather just before. And this is something which impacts people in urban and rural areas. We know that obviously urban areas, where there is a lot of concern about air pollution from roadside traffic and from vehicle emissions, but this is something that we definitely see significantly more of in terms of equations in rural areas too. People that are concerned by just the sheer quantity of fires that are taking place in their village. As someone that grew up in a rural community myself, I'm aware that during the winter times you can walk down a street which may only have 10 houses on it, but you're really impacted by the thickness of the smoke that's coming out and how that can impact your breathing. We know this is also a social justice issue, so people in more deprived neighbourhoods are more likely to live with a lung condition, and it is more likely to be fatal. Almost half of people burning wood are in the top social class category, but everyone feels the effects. And 26% of the most deprived neighbourhoods in the top decile of the English Index of Multiple Deprivation have extremely high levels of PM 2.5. So those are people in the poorest communities that are suffering the most from air pollution. Some of that from wood burning, as we know, but they're less likely to have a wood burner, just as they're less likely to have a car as well. They're the people that are impacted by it the most. They're more likely to develop lung cancer, far more likely to develop COPD, and far more likely to suffer mortality because of respiratory illness, which is shocking. So we know that there's much more to be done, and there's much more to be done in terms of the actions that can actually be taken on wood burning, but also about the way that people are talking about it and the number of people that are talking about it. There is a focus, we think, in air pollution on traffic and traffic emissions, and it certainly feels like it's time to start bringing wood burning much more into that conversation because of the impact that it's having and the ratios that it contributes to PM emissions. There's growing concerns around energy and cost of living. As we know, reports like this that show the economic impact will be so crucial for that, particularly as wood burning is more likely to be relied upon as people do start to feel the squeeze. Public awareness is going to be a crucial part of this for us both as organisations, but again, as we heard from Mums for Lungs there, about undertaking it at a national level, and we need to see something that's far more coherent and organised. Protective policies need to start being developed, potentially something similar to vehicle-style scrappage schemes for burning stoves, local empowerment for local authorities to be able to start to have greater powers to enforce bans or restrictions where they feel it's necessary. And then also at a national level, we are currently going through the consultation process for the Environment Act. Seeing much more stringent and ambitious targets in that will be crucial in having a knock-on effect for what policies may come down the road in tackling wood burning and the emissions that come from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. And you're very right to raise that this is indeed very much a social justice issue. So now we'll start looking towards solutions, looking at some insights from our next two speakers, from Rachel Pidgeon, who is Portfolio Manager at Impact on Urban Health, leading their programmes on the health effects of air pollution and childhood obesity, and from Nick Roberts, who is a Senior Director at Kantar, and they are going to share their findings from their recent research on understanding and addressing the prevalence and drivers of wood burning.
Thank you. We're about 2 years into our air pollution program, looking at how people's health is affected and how to improve the health of people who are most impacted by poor air quality. One of the key priorities in this first develop phase of our program has been to reduce exposure to air pollution in the environments where people spend their time. And what we have been doing with Kantar is looking at wood burning. So for the last kind of year and a bit, we've been working with them on this research. We started with an evidence review of lots of the academic literature and other data that's out there, and a kind of gap analysis to understand the current state of knowledge and what else might be needed. And then what I'm going to talk to you mostly about today is the work that we did most recently to understand what campaign elements can work and don't work at shifting attitudes among both burners and non-burners. The low awareness of health impacts that a couple of the speakers, including Mums for Lungs and Tim and Frank, all spoke to, even when there is some awareness, the impacts were typically seen to be minimal compared to other sources like traffic or industry. We're up against a lot of positive associations with wood burning, including people thinking there are environmental benefits, that it's carbon neutral. Some of that's reinforced by the industry, emotional associations with fire and coziness, natural living. And there's just that kind of builds up to this lack of a wide social agreement at this stage that it is harmful and that there should be action taken, including banning and controlling. What Kantar tested were a series of platforms. These included protecting the vulnerable, so drawing attention to the impact of wood burning on children, the elderly, people with heart and lung conditions, bringing to life the impact that it has on those who are most likely to be harmed. As bad as, which was using monitoring data and other evidence to show the relative harm and contribution to air pollution compared with other common categories like trucks, cars, and other transport. And unfortunate truth, which was having relevant and credible experts present evidence around the health and environmental harms associated with wood burning, acknowledging that there are positive associations with it from people, but also that there's new evidence telling us that it's harmful. Making the invisible visible, which was more about visually representing smoke and harms associated with burning with imagery, comparing emissions to cigarettes, visualizing pollutants in relatable ways, and then future-proofing your home, which was more about building a case for the predicted short lifespan of wood burners. So suggesting they're not a good investment, they will become obsolete, there will be regulation, and addressing some of those low carbon myths. And in terms of responses, interestingly, and unfortunately for us as a health foundation, for most burners and non-burners, the health risk was not salient and it was often minimized compared with other activities or sources of air pollution. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a minute. But an example quote from somebody, "I probably catch all those gases, stood outside waiting for the bus," from an aesthetic burner. So kind of speaks to people not seeing wood burning as a significant contribution to health impacts. The economic argument, so that future-proofing your home, generated pushback as well. So people did believe that regulation might come, but things like energy and heating prices, among others, made that argument hard to swallow. And I think it's worth emphasizing this was done before the even more devastating current cost of living crisis. That's something that we're going to be looking to test quite rigorously in the next phase of this campaign development as the context continues to change. Tonally, messages were best received when they acknowledged the novelty of information, so that they weren't interpreted as blaming or shaming burners, so that the kind of unfortunate truth argument. And we've got a quote from someone in London who's a burner: "I quite like that we recognized we were ill-informed and that some pivotal research proved a link." And in terms of messengers, both burners and non-burners were more receptive to messages being delivered by independent, non-governmental parties like charities with public health interests, or trusted celebrities like David Attenborough, who we all would know and love. And the more emotion-based platforms, so around people who are more vulnerable, particularly children, they generated quite strong pushback and could be perceived as manipulative. So I think particularly when it came to children, some people would interpret that as an accusation of parents like intentionally or unintentionally exposing their children to something harmful is quite an emotional attack almost. And this explicit focus on health consequences before first establishing a clear connection to air pollution prompted some more of those negative emotional reactions. So we saw a real need for first raising awareness between wood burning and a connection with air pollution, which continued research, such as what we've seen today, will continue to help with. So due to those low levels of awareness of the harm, and also due to some of those emotional attachments to wood burning, participants responded best to more fact-based approaches. So we saw comparisons to car data as being effective, but equally people wanted more comparisons to alternative heat sources to interpret the relative impact of wood burning. So I think, Marisa, some of what your research spoke to on how the social cost compares across different sources will be really interesting and helpful for this.
The public, and this included the majority of non-burners, were incredibly sort of defensive to the idea of being told what to do, or to be told that this thing with which they had positive associations was somehow wrong. The final visual here, reason this was so effective was because it was new information, it was seen as factual, and it didn't explicitly push the message of harm, but allowed individuals to come to that kind of conclusion themselves. But we're talking here about mass messaging, and I think there it is really important to consider where the public is coming from and how to frame the message. Just an example with framing is like one of the things we looked at was eco-stove legislation. And that's legislation to improve the quality of wood burning stoves so they emit less pollution, but that's very much being seen as condoning wood burning, that these are eco stoves, these are eco things to have, and feeds into this impression that people have that wood burning stoves are an environmental thing because of these kind of messages around carbon emissions that are being put out by the industry. So as we go on to develop the strategy, I think it's just very important to bear in mind that for this kind of mass messaging, coming at the public from where they are and staging that to bring them along the journey is really important to bear in mind. There's a role for campaigning alongside that, and of course, claims need to be supported by evidence. And it's really interesting to think how the evidence from Marissa's research could inform messaging, especially around the contribution of a small number of individuals to this large problem that affects everyone. But with the blaming and shaming, it feels like that may be a message for a little further down the road once we've kind of laid the ground with people that they understand some of these health impacts on a higher level. So yeah, we'll be targeting our work for now and this campaign coming up based on where we think we can have impact with an initial pilot to prevent take-up among new burners, and there'll be a secondary target of reducing burning among those who burn the most. And just to wrap up some of these, to emphasize some of these messages, there's a really high potential for backfire effect when it comes to campaigns. So that's why this kind of initial raising awareness feels really important for us to try and coordinate right now. We're up against this entrenched behavior, so understanding people's self-perceptions as well as people who burn really well and are self-reliant. Some of that stuff helps us think about it. Cognitive dissonance has come up before, and lots of people working in public health will recognize these contradictions between people saying they're aware, but they also love their wood stoves. So all of our messaging and kind of continued testing will build on all of this, and I think try and generate even further and more specific evidence and directions.
Thank you, Rachel and Nick. A lot of us evidently very keen to do something about domestic burning across the country to protect people's health and tackle climate change. And it seems therefore that it would make sense to collaborate, both for the pooling of intelligence and skills and creativity, but also sort of pooling resources to be more efficient. there's only so far you can go with behaviour change if there isn't kind of national incentives, national sort of policy framework and environment that enables this. So there is a policy group that is keen to develop and take an ask on domestic burning to decision makers. There were some really good, clear asks from Mums for Lungs, for example. So yeah, the team might kill me for this, but I think I'm going to commit a little bit more of gap time to ensure that some of these things get moved on a bit, beyond which I don't know how much will be involved, but you know, let's keep this momentum going. So I think what I'm going to offer, or what I'd like to do is to perhaps set up a follow-up conversation with the local authorities who would like to work collaboratively together on domestic burning. There are a few in each of the meeting groups today in the breakout rooms, but perhaps we can set up a follow-up call with those local authorities to see where there's potential for collaboration. That brings us to the end. So thank you very much to everybody who attended today and gave such valuable contributions throughout. Thank you to the Global Action Plan Clean Air team for facilitating quite so many breakout groups and for doing all the behind the scenes tech wizardry, and especially big thanks to Ben Hudson and Charlie Porter for organising everything about today. And thank you again to our thought-provoking and passionate speakers, so Marisa Kortlenad, Professor Frank Kelly, Hazel Agombar, Tim Dexter, Rachel Pidgeon and Nick Roberts, which just leaves me to say enjoy the beautiful spring evening. So thank you all very much and goodbye.